So we're moving to the secondary now, guys. The safety position. Safety might be the best. I know I've said that like 3 or 4 times already with like numerous other positions, but safety might be the best position in free agency because we have like actually 5 players that are like all pro caliber safeties, not just like good safeties, not just like starting safeties, but like 5 guys that could be named to the first team all pro in 2021. So safety is loaded. Okay. So let's take a look at the safeties. And we also have a lot of depth too, like good caliber number 2, good caliber number 3 safeties. So my top 10 free agent safeties. Justin Simmons is clearly number 1. I think he's a top 3 or 4 safety in the league. He is incredibly versatile. I think he has to cover up a lot of issues that Denver has in the secondary. And I think if he goes elsewhere to a better corner group, he'll be a lot better. He is a rare player that is a deep free safety that also makes an incredible amount of plays versus the run. He is a phenomenal, just overall athlete, leaping ability, coverage ability, size, all of it. He doesn't really have any flaws in his game. He can cover in man, he can cover in zone, he could play the run, he could be strong safety, he could be free safety, he could be nickel corner, he could be linebacker. He could be a lot of different positions, and those are the type of safeties that I really love. Number 2 is Marcus Maye in a similar way. So the reason I have Marcus Maye, Justin Simmons, and John Johnson in the top 3 over Marcus Williams and Anthony Harris is because of their versatility. So they're all about the same age, and they're all about the same talent. But Simmons, Maye, and Johnson are the most versatile of all of them. So, and that means that more teams would be willing to spend on them. Marcus Williams is a true free safety. He's a deep free safety. He's a ball hawk in the middle of the field. But he doesn't impact the game as much as John Johnson, Marcus Maye, or Justin Simmons. He is more of a like, don't give up big plays or intercept the ball type of guy. Like, he's not a, let's make a big hit in the box and let's cover this guy in the nickel and let's do this and that. He's a deep free safety. And same as Anthony Harris. The thing with Anthony Harris, which I know PFF is like really high on Anthony Harris. They've graded him very well. He's a good coverage player as a free safety. But we've only seen him in one system, one scheme, and we've never seen him play anything else. And that is a little concerning as opposed to these other guys. Like Marcus Maye has played like 3 different defenses. He's played free safety, he's played strong safety, and he's been good at both, right? Justin Simmons has played for 3 years as the highest graded safety in the league. He plays free safety, strong safety. He's good in the box. He's good out of the box, right? John Johnson's played in multiple different schemes. He's played strong safety. He's played free safety. Like, these guys are more versatile than 4 and 5. John Johnson was awesome this year and best season of his career, but it does concern me a little that he wasn't as good last year or the year before. He was pretty good in 2018, I think. Number 6, KEANU NEAL, who I've always loved. I think he's an excellent strong safety, but he's a little bit of a dying breed. And I think with KEANU NEAL, he is like that Seattle scheme, Cam Chancellor type player. He's a big hitter. He, makes plays, forcing fumbles, big hits versus the run, all that sort of stuff. But I think he could be a guy that I'd be very interested if a team signs him as like a hybrid linebacker. I'd be very interested to see if that is how he is signed, or if he moves on from Atlanta, if that's what he does. Or maybe, Seattle, or, maybe a team like running that scheme, right, signs him as their strong safety. Maybe. I could see that too. Number 7, Malik Hooker. Malik Hooker is an absolutely awesome playmaker, free safety type when he plays, but he never plays. He's a former highly touted first-round pick who I think could be a huge gem if he stays healthy. Jaquiski Tart is number 8. I just think so, really well-rounded player and plays in that Seattle scheme as well as a strong safety. And similar to KEANU NEAL, I would say he's better at man than NEAL is, but he's not as big of a playmaker as NEAL. He is just solid. And then number 9, RAYSHAWN JENKINS. I think super underrated from the Chargers. Had really good statistics this year. He's kind of like, who would you compare him to? He's like a Trey Boston, like a little free safety, a little strong safety, a little bit of everything. Good in coverage. Number 10, I have Duron Harmon, is just a really awesome number 3 safety. He's a great free safety. He's like, he can do everything Marcus Williams can do, but just not as well. Like, that is what Duron Harmon is. And he has plenty of experience. So, and leadership. So that's what you're getting with him. All right, let's take a look at the undervalued and the buyer beware safeties. So undervalued, RAYSHAWN JENKINS. I just think he's a really good player that not a lot of people know who he is. He's taken place of Derwin James and played very well. And he can play multiple different positions. Malik Hooker, I think, could be undervalued because I think his upper level of play is elite. KEANU NEAL, same thing. Both players have been hurt, but they're still pretty young. And if you get them at a pretty cheap contract, I think they could really go off and play well. Buyer beware John Johnson, because this year was his best year. And if he leaves the Rams system, I'm not sure he is quite as good. Anthony Harris, similar thing. So Anthony Harris is actually older than you would think. I think he's like 29. I could be wrong, but I think he's almost 30. And he's only been good for like 2 or 3 years. And then you look at that he's a free safety that has played in one Zimmer scheme. And I don't know how many teams actually run that same defense. And I just don't know how conducive he is to other defenses. So that's why I would say buyer beware. But I could be totally wrong. Again, guys, just my opinion. All right, so that's the safety position. A really good position. Obviously loaded in the top 10. There are much better players once you go down the list as well that you could take a look at if your team needs a safety. The cornerback position. Always one of my favorites. Always one of my favorites to see where these guys sign, because I think the corner position is overall one of the more scheme-dependent positions. It's overall one of the more inconsistent positions, which makes it more boom or bust. And I feel like the corner free agency market almost always has a direct impact with who surprises defensively from year to year, right? We've seen defenses that have had guys that you didn't really know were any good at corner, and then all of a sudden they sign like a street free agent for like 1 year for like $2 million, and he just has a rejuvenation. Like a guy that comes to mind is Bashaud Breeland of the Chiefs. Like way better on the Chiefs than he ever was on Washington. Like just way better. And that's the type of player that I think should be valuable. And the thing with corner is more than any other position, I think, on defense, it's all about scheme. It's all about coverage, what you do. Like, are you a man team? Are you a zone team? What do you ask the corner to do on a given play? And that's what fascinates me about corner. So let's take a look at the top 10 guys. So at number 1, I have William Jackson. I think he is the only guy on this list that I would pay as a number 1 cornerback. I think he is a guy that if he leaves Cincinnati and goes to a good defensive staff, he could be absolutely phenomenal. I think he could be a top 10 corner on some systems, on some teams with good coaching and know how to use his ability, because I think he can play in a lot of different systems and I think he can be successful there. And he's still fairly young. Jason Verrett is number 2. Jason Verrett's number 2 because when he plays, he is really good. And I think he can be good in man or zone. He has speed. He has size. He has a wide variety of skills that could make him conducive to a lot of different schemes. That's something that I value a lot with ranking corners. That's not specifically with signing corners, because that's more scheme specific. But in ranking corners, I look at, can you play in every system? Can you play man? Can you play zone? Can you play cover 2? Can you play cover 3? You know, can you press? Can you play, you know, can you play nickel? Can you play outside? So that's what I look at with corners a lot. And Xavier Rhodes is an example of a guy that he's at number 3. Despite playing better than William Jackson or Jason Verrett this year, he is good in one system, right? He's going to be good with the Colts. He's going to be good in Tampa 2. He's going to be good in cover 3 systems. He's going to be good in, you know, maybe quarters, right? But he's not really a man guy. If he goes back to the Colts, I'd expect him to be a good number 1 corner. But if he goes to, I don't know, New England, I think he would struggle. That's just my opinion. Number 4, Shaq Griffin, who I think it's the opposite. I think he's a better player than the scheme allows him to be. I think Shaq Griffin would be a better player on a different team. That's my opinion. He's young. He's still got a lot to improve on, but he has a lot of potential, and he's had some pretty good seasons. Last year was probably his best. This year was a step below, but he's still a good number 2 corner. Number 5, Richard Sherman. Sherman regressed a lot this year when he played. And the problem I have with Sherman is the argument I just made. Sherman is one system. If I had Richard Sherman on an island versus Will Fuller, right? I would be asking to literally have suicide. It is suicide to have Richard Sherman play man press coverage versus a speed receiver. You are going to lose. That's just my opinion. At this point in his career, not saying in 2013 Richard Sherman couldn't do that, but it's 2021. And Richard Sherman, I actually think, would be an incredible safety, but I don't know if he wants to make that move. But as a high-end number 2, a veteran savvy number 2, I think he'd be awesome. And as a number 1 in a system that fits his skill set, I think he could be still pretty good. Then you look at number 6, Ronald Darby had an amazing year this year. He sucked last year, so that's just the position, right? And I think in Washington, again, guys, scheme fit is important. Ronald Darby is 26, I think, so that moved him up in the rankings because I think Ronald Darby has had like 2 or 3 really good years and like 1 or 2 really bad years and nowhere in between, which makes him really hard to rank. But that's where I have him. Number 7, Bashaud Breeland, because I think Bashaud Breeland's actually really underrated. He shut down a lot of guys. I mean, the Chiefs gave up the least amount of yards to the perimeter wide receiver position this year, and a lot of that is because of Bashaud Breeland. And he's also really good in man coverage, which I value. So Breeland's at number 7. Number 8, Patrick Peterson, who's had 3 consecutive seasons in a row. He's not who he used to be, not even close. And I think he could still be a good number 2 for a lot of teams, but he's no longer a number 1. Quentin Dunbar, I think, had a down year this year, but I think could bounce back next year on a different team potentially. Chidobe Awuzie from Dallas is, I think, a little underrated. Still pretty young, 25 or 26, and more of an outside corner, but can play in the nickel as well. And I think he's a solid number 2 corner. And overall, his stats show you that he's been pretty productive when he's been on the field. This year, he got hurt. So let's take a look at my undervalued and my buyer beware guys. So undervalued, you'll see some guys that aren't in the top 10 here. Cameron Sutton from Pittsburgh. He's their number 4 corner, but he played a significant amount of snaps, both inside and on the perimeter. I think he's pretty solid in different schemes. I think he could be pretty good. He's got pretty good size, pretty good length, man ability, zone ability, and I like the versatility with him, and he's still young. GAREON CONLEY is somebody that if he goes to a man coverage team, like this would be the classic Kansas City Chiefs cornerback pickup, GAREON CONLEY, because in man-to-man, he is much better than he is in zone. So a team that values man coverage could get a value in GAREON CONLEY, especially man press coverage. Michael Davis is the exact opposite. So Michael Davis was really good with the Chargers this year. Really productive, and I think in that scheme, he is undervalued. Like, I'd rather sign Michael Davis to 1 year or 2 years, $8 million, and 1 year, $4 million than I'd sign Richard Sherman to 2 years, $20 million. Like, Michael Davis was just as good as Richard Sherman this year, if not better, and played in the same system. And nobody really knows who he is, and he's young. Buyer beware, Richard Sherman and Patrick Peterson, because they're two Hall of Fame players, but they're not Hall of Famers anymore. So when you're that, you got to be buyer beware. And that's not saying that I didn't used to love Richard Sherman or Patrick Peterson. I love both players, especially Richard Sherman, but you're old, man. It's free agency. I don't know what to tell you. So those are the corners. And finally, we have a final position here before the chat, is the nickel position. So I made a whole new position for nickel corners because I felt it was worthy of it, because there's a lot of nickel corners in free agency this year that exclusively play nickel, like barely play on the outside. They play in the nickel position, which is covering the slot receiver, which I think is probably the most undervalued position by mainstream football people. Like, nickel position is extremely, extremely important, and I think should be valued way higher than it currently is. So let's take a look at the top 10 nickel corners available. Number 1 is Brian Poole of the Jets. He's the Jets' best corner and really good the last 2 years. Really low completion percentage, passer rating allowed, despite playing on a terrible defense. Very good player. Mike Hilton, solid player. You would be a little concerned that he played with a great pass rush, I guess, but I think he's been the most consistent corner on his team for the past 2 years. KWAUN Williams is a totally different player from Poole or Hilton. Poole or Hilton are smaller, quicker corners, and KWAUN Williams is like bigger, and he's more of like he can also play the run type of guy. And he'd be a really good fit for a scheme like San Francisco, like Seattle. He'd be a really good fit there. Now, Hill, and that's not Tyreek or Taysom Hill, guys. That's a different one. Hill is interesting because I think based on how he played this year, he's top 3. But because he was surrounded by such great other talents on the Rams defense, it's hard for me to really know what he is. But I will say this about Hill. He plays on the outside or the inside. So both things, he can do it either or. So that is good. He has versatility, more so than a Hilton or a Poole, who are exclusively nickel guys. Desmond King, I think, is a little overvalued because I think he had an all-pro year 3 years ago, but hasn't been as good since. And I think because he's still young, people will pay him as if he was his 2018 form, but he hasn't been that since. And I think he is more of just an okay player than a really, really good player. Number 6 is Darqueze Dennard, who plays outside or inside and is pretty good at both. And everywhere he's been, he played for Atlanta this year, Cincinnati, has been pretty good. Not like great, but like a pretty good nickel starter. Mackensie Alexander. Is it Mackensie? I believe it's Mackensie. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it's Mackensie Alexander, Cincinnati. He is actually pretty impressive when I watched him in some big games this year. Like, the one that stands out to me was what he did to Juju. I mean, he destroyed him. I think Alexander in a man system would be a better player than he currently is. I think he's kind of underrated, actually. Number 8, Chandon Sullivan for Green Bay. Only really 1 year to go off of, but he was all right. Average player, nothing special, but young. So I'd rather go with him than a guy like Nickel Roby-Coleman, who's maybe had higher highs, but he's getting up there in age. And number 10, DJ Hayden, who was amazing last year statistically, but fell off this year. And he's had more kind of disappointing years than great years, but he's shown that he can play in this league at a very high level. So he's one of those wild card type corners that you see every year. So those are the nickel rankings. Now to the undervalued and the potentially buyer beware. KWAUN Williams, Jordan Lewis, Mackenzie Alexander. KWAUN Williams, because he was hurt this year, I think if teams pay him, and get him on a 1 or 2 year contract, like a prove it deal, I think he'd be unbelievable at that price. Jordan Lewis from Dallas. Young still. I think he's 25 or 26, exclusively nickel corner. I think he'd be better in a man scheme. And he just always stands out to me when I watch Dallas. I think he was probably their most consistent corner this year. And I know that's not saying a lot, but I think his youth helps him. I see the upside with him. He's not great right now, but I see upside. Mackenzie Alexander, same thing with him a little, but I just saw some really awesome elite performances from him this year that makes me believe that, maybe with a better defense around him, he could be a really good player in a season, one of these seasons down the road. Buyer beware. Troy Hill, because of what I stated about him with the Rams defense, and Desmond King, obviously, for obvious reasons. So those are the undervalued and the buyer beware. And that is the preview, the in-depth analysis on NFL free agency, every position, top 10. We did it in